Me trigger someone? Never. Well, you weren't on the Lies Feminists Tell Spring Tour because apparently I did that a lot. Hey, I'm Kristan Hawkins. Thanks for tuning in to this new edition of Explicitly Pro-Life. All right, so today I want to talk a little bit about my Lies Feminists Tell Spring Speaking Tour. As you all know, I go on campuses every semester and I deliver a speech to audiences pro-life and pro-abortion. So this semester was probably our most exciting semester yet. We had fewer events, but larger events. Got a lot more attention from the pro-abortion movement on campuses, which is exactly what we want. I don't take time away from my family, from my children. No offense, to go lecture other pro-lifers about how to be more pro-life. The reason I sacrifice that time away from my family, away from my children, is because I want to go and I want to start changing minds. I want to start planting seeds of doubt within self-described pro-choice students. So I want to start today's episode by just going through some of the big objections I heard. So every speech is pretty much the same that I give with, what I gave this semester. It followed the same kind of script. I added a few things depending on where I was at, but it was pretty much the same about the lies that we hear from the feminist movement, right? That the mainstream feminist movement, that sex is without consequence, that dangerous hormonal birth control is needed in order for me to be free, that abortion is safe and nothing, and that abortion is also needed for my freedom. And then the fifth one I kind of talked about this semester was about how the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment, we're calling everything related to Abortion Act, is somehow going to be needed to be passed and to assure our equality. So I talked about all of those different myths. I also talked about first wave feminism, how the first wave and many of the second wave feminists were actually pro-life, and how it was two men who hijacked the pro-abortion movement. But you can watch that video on Facebook, our Students for Life crew. We did a few Facebook Lives from campuses. But I want to go through the Q&As because every campus, I have about 30 minutes to about 45 minutes of Q&A. And we ask pro-choice students to go and be the first ones because I don't want easy questions. I will admit I went to Franciscan University because it's only half an hour from my house this semester, and it was probably my lowest energy talk. Sorry guys, because it was all pro-lifers. I will have to admit that I went to Franciscan University on this spring's tour, and I unfortunately have to say it was probably my lowest energy talk all semester. I was kind of freaked out because my parents were there, and I do tend to curse a little bit. I mean, this podcast is explicitly pro-life. I've been really watching myself. I just want to say I've been very proud of my potty mouth. It hasn't been too bad, but on campuses it gets a little worse. But it was low energy, not because my parents were there, but it was more because it was all pro-lifers. But I went because it's 30 minutes and it's in the Students for Life group's restarting. So I love you guys and have me back. And I'll see you at Mass. But the first campus I went to on my spring tour was Boston College, and that was crazy. Apparently I was the most controversial speaker the school has had in years, which I find pretty funny that little old me is so controversial because it's like very clear what I stand for. But there were, op-eds against me coming, and I had to do a bunch of press. And I love when the other side does op-eds against me before I come because it's giving me free publicity for my talk. So it's fantastic. The room was supposed to be open to all the public. So we invited pro-lifers from across the Boston area to come. But then with all of the protests starting to emerge, the school changed its mind and made it a closed door event. So only students were allowed to go, and they had to RSVP and get tickets. So all the tickets actually went really fast. It was only a 150 person room. And the pro-life group told me going in, we only think about 50 of the tickets, probably less, are for pro-lifers. The rest are going to be for pro-abortion students. So I kind of knew what I was getting into. When I got there were like 6 police officers who greeted me in my car, and When I left, actually, they surrounded my car. I wouldn't leave until I left. So I felt totally safe and secure the whole time. But it's sad because this is a college, a Catholic college campus. It's a very well-respected Catholic college. And you would think like you wouldn't need 6 police officers to protect a pro-life Catholic speaker on a Catholic college. But that's a podcast for another day. So Boston, we had, typical things that the pro-choicers raise. The first student got up and was very nervous and kept trying to make an argument for abortion. She took exception that I kept using the word pro-abortion during my speech, not pro-choice. And a lot of times if you hear me speak publicly, I'll use the terms interchangeably. But I actually got her to admit, I said, well, no, you can't be pro-choice. This is a moral issue. Can you be pro-choice on slavery? She looked appalled when I said that. Absolutely not. I agree with her. So I said, you either have to be anti-abortion, anti-legal abortion, or you're pro-legal abortion. And the position you're advocating for is pro-legal abortion. So why don't you just say you're pro-abortion? So after going around, she finally admitted, fine, I'm pro-abortion. And then the protesters in the room started clapping for her, which was great because then I just turned to the administrator and was like, there you have it. A very well-respected Catholic school and your students are cheering to being pro-abortion. But anyway, so then the next question, this girl got up and started, advocating for abortion, saying, well, you worked for the Bush administration and you worked for the Trump administration, which is not true. I did not work for the Trump administration. I served on President Trump's pro-life advisory board amongst a bunch of other people. But Trump's policies are anti-life and they're killing people, which that's a whole nother discussion, right? About whether or not healthcare policies kill people or if they're pro-life or pro-choice or whatever, pro-death or whatever. But what I did get her on camera to do was I kept asking her. I said, okay, well, I agree with you that children who come across the border, whose parents have made a reckless journey and a dangerous journey to bring their children across the Mexico-U.S. border, who are starving or malnourished or have some other affliction, that those children should be treated. We should use taxpayer dollars to treat those children and make sure they survive. I would never advocate that those children should perish, right? And I said, do you agree with me? And she said, yes, absolutely. I said, great. Now, would you agree with me that a child who's born alive during a botched abortion in an abortion facility should also receive medical care? So that child shouldn't be left to die. And she said, no. And I said, why not? And she said, well, I know you'll say science, but it's not really a human. It's not a baby. This clip went viral. We actually put it, just shortened up the clip, put it on our Facebook page. A few moments later, a bunch of conservative outlets picked it up. It was crazy. It was like the one day in April. I was gone like 18 days in April from travel, and it was like my most traveled month. A lot of it was for work, but some of it was for cystic fibrosis with the kids. But it was just a crazy month. I had one day in April. We were going to chill out. It was my second son's birthday. I got birthday cake. We were just going to chill out. And then that's the day that clip went viral. It was on like Apple's trending news. It was all over Fox. I had to like hurry up and go to DC to do Laura Ingram's show. They didn't even have time to do my makeup. I had to do it myself on the plane. My hair looked terrible. Oh my gosh. That clip went everywhere. Why? Because we got the abortion left, to admit what we hear all the time on campuses, that they believe that children at the border should get medical care, but not children who are born alive during abortion. We showed the illogical position of the abortion industry. We showed the illogical position of the pro-choice movement, right? Why? Why did this girl think that a child born in an abortion facility shouldn't get medical care? Is it because she's a heinous person? No. I think she had very good intentions, but she doesn't believe in science. Once again, and I've said this before in this show, it always comes down to what is it? Fundamentally, the question with abortion is, what is it and what's its value? What is the child in the womb and what's he or she's value? And that's exactly what happens here. She acknowledges acknowledge the value of a child who's already born, who's coming across our border, living in poverty, who's dying, but doesn't acknowledge the value of a child born alive during abortion. Why? Because to her, the child only has value because of their wantedness, that the child born alive in an abortion facility was chosen to die. The mother paid somebody to violently end the life of their child. Therefore, that child didn't have any value because of their wantedness, which quite frankly is not true. Your humanity can never depend on your wantedness. If so, that's a pretty damn scary society. So that was Boston College. I'm trying to think here of the next college I went to. I'm blanking on a college. I went to Cal Berkeley soon after that. So, Cal Berkeley, the place that they literally set fire to their campus when Ann Coulter was coming. It was a good attendance. Once again, we had a good number of people. Earlier in the day, we had our Planned Parenthood Truth Tour out on campus, and someone had come and ripped our banner and threw it in the creek, and they were kind of being aggressive. So we weren't sure what was going to happen. We had talked to the police beforehand to make sure they were going to be there, and we had protection on my private protection. And so when I started speaking, a girl would walk up and stand behind me with a coat hanger. And it was funny because there was a man who was at the back of the room filming this and orchestrating it and telling the women when to go up, because every few minutes another woman would get up to stand. And it was kind of getting weird because I was giving my speech and they were getting closer and closer and surrounding me. Thankfully, Matt, our communications director, was texting with our team, was watching a via live stream and saying, you got to get the police up there. They're going to surround Kristan, which is what they've done before to a lot of other pro-life or conservative speakers, is the protesters or pro-aborts will actually just surround the podium, and then you can't really hear the person, and then they can start chanting or whatever. These girls were silent. They just had up the coat hangers, but we had to get police involved and whatever. I was able to finish a speech. I was actually disappointed because they wouldn't ask questions. They just stood and kind of smirked, and every time I would say something, go, making weird noise. But we, in the Q&A, I kind of went over every talking point I thought they would have. The first one starting with the myth of the coat hanger abortion. This is something that we see all the time on college campuses, in protests. We see it on Twitter now, especially in light of the Alabama abortion ban, that this is what post-Roe America is going to look like. That's false. That wasn't what pre-Roe America looked like. You had Planned Parenthood's own medical director, Mary Calderon, in 1955 say that the Planned Parenthood Conference found that 90% of physicians, 9% of people committing abortions were physicians in good standing in their community. You had the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, that measured a mortality of abortion deaths from legal and illegal abortions in the years before Roe, immediately after Roe. The numbers remained the same. I think it was 90 in 1970, 1975. It was 84, something like that. 90, not 10,000. You have Bernard Nathanson, the co-founder of NARAL Pro-Choice America. Bernard Nathanson was an abortionist in New York State who partnered with Larry Ladder, known eugenicist. Ladder believed in a pending population bomb in the 1970s, and that's why he came to believe abortion is this great solution. They're the ones who sold Betty Friedan the lies that the abortion was needed for women's freedom. It was Bernard Nathanson who later in life, when he became a pro-life advocate, admitted that he had grossly exaggerated the number to 5,000 to 10,000, and that anyone involved and looking would realize it was false. But he called it the morality of the revolution, it seemed okay to do. So there was this myth of the coat hanger abortion, this myth of the back alley abortion. And it's so sad to see the left continue, the abortion left, to continue to use these things without really, evaluating the merits of what they're saying. They just regurgitate what they've heard for 40 plus years. Miami University of Ohio, I went to that campus, which by the way is really in the middle of Ohio, middle of nowhere. That was not a fun 4.5 hour drive in the rain home. But that was a great group. The Students for Life group was amazing. My Students for Life Wilberforce fellow, Ellie Whitman, led the group this year. So awesome. I had to go. A professor, a women's studies professor, actually took to a student newspaper to condemn me before I went. Then there was an organized protest. So that was great because attendance was once again standing room only. They had to turn people away. People were mad because the room wasn't big enough. That was another one where, the first person who got up started giving me a bunch of labels for what I was. And one of them was transphobic. And so I want to talk about that kind of the trans. It's kind of weird because like never in my speech do I talk about trans people or people who are gender confused. I don't talk about gay marriage. I don't talk about gay sex. But it comes up. It's been coming up. And it really boiled over at Western Washington University, my last stop on the spring speaking tour. The first woman, this is a school, by the way, who had burned the banner of my face advertising the event, set the banner on fire while it was still attached to the building. There were several hundred protesters. We had 2 rooms for my speech, both of which were filled up to capacity. People were mad they couldn't get in. The feminist group now is hosting Truth's Feminists Tell in response to my speech. But that was the first woman who raised her hand in objection to my speech. I didn't have any pro-lifers ask me questions. It was all pro-choice people. And I could only do 40 minutes of Q&A because I had to take a night flight back and they were mad because I cut them off. But the woman got mad because she said that, in my speech, I kept referring to she and her when talking about helping pregnant people, and that not all pregnant people are women or she's or hers, and that she was non-binary, and that I need to be more trans inclusive with the pronouns I use when I speak. I felt bad for this girl, and I actually still feel bad for her. I'm still thinking about, what can be done, because I think this is a very sad reflection of where we are. I kind of just simply said well, if you can get pregnant, you're a woman. And if you can't get pregnant, you're not a woman. And that's obviously what it means. There's women who can't get pregnant, women who have had their uterus removed, whatever. But it was just very basic. I was like, you're either an XXer or you're an XY. And so she freaked out, screamed, let out a big scream, and slammed her head down on the desk. The audience obviously turned against me very quickly. Well, they were already against me, but they were more against me than ever before because I reaffirmed the belief, the scientific fact that there are in fact 2 genders. And what I think struck me so much about what this girl did was it's almost like the information I was telling her was new, that she was in fact a woman, that she might be gender confused, but she is in fact a woman. Her sex is female. And I think the political left has done this whole thing of separating sex from gender, which is crazy. And that's a whole podcast episode I can go into. But that's what I saw at Miami University, the transphobe. I actually heard that a year and a half ago at Pacific Lutheran University in Tacoma, where a woman said the same thing of, well, I don't identify as a woman, so you kept using she or her pronouns. Western Washington was the same questions I got from the pro boards at every other university. Foster care. I heard a lot about foster care. I've also seen a lot about foster care system on Twitter in light of the Alabama abortion ban passage, saying that we need abortion because it's crueler to bring someone into a life of poverty. That's pretty messed up when you think about it. Think about the people in your life, the people historically have achieved great things, but they've had to overcome adversity. One person you think of is our former president, Barack Obama, born to poverty, born to a single mother. There's all of these people that we know of that were born into difficult circumstances, but it didn't negate their value. What I said last week about, how your birth certificate doesn't come with like special points, where you get more points based on your parents' income level, education level, their status, or, if their candles were lit when you were conceived. Like, you don't get special points in your birth certificate. We're all equally human beings. We all share one thing, and that's our humanity. And that's what makes us all equal to each other. So yeah, the foster care system thing comes up over and over again. Like, somehow it's better to eliminate the sufferer than eliminate the suffering. And I've talked about this with cystic fibrosis over and over again. Like, how is that better to abort children with cystic fibrosis, which CF has a 90% abortion rate? Same as about Down syndrome, sadly, because the mantra is, just do away with them. You can always try again, but it's eliminating the sufferer rather than eliminating the suffering. And that's so messed up that our society has gotten to a point where suffering is considered like a moral wrong. Suffering is not a moral wrong. Suffering isn't fun, but we all will suffer. And suffering isn't necessarily a bad or evil thing. Good things can come from suffering. And the other thing about this whole foster care thing that really bugs me is, like, I don't think I know people don't understand what foster care is, because the goal of foster care isn't a place where you just drop off kids who are unwanted. The goal of foster care is actually to reunite kids with their biological parents who may be going through a hard time, maybe struggling with an addiction and want to get clean. Parents are going through counseling. That's the goal of foster care. It's not that kids are supposed to get stuck in foster care and then get adopted out. It's actually to reunite them. Now, that does happen. There are many kids that are in foster care and are waiting to be adopted. Focus on the Family a couple of years ago took on this whole effort. They're based in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and they went to churches throughout Colorado and said, like, we need to take care of these orphans. We need to adopt these kids waiting in foster care. I remember one statistic was saying that, like, single-handedly, they know they're responsible for at least a 25% drop in children in foster care waiting for families, and they just went to churches. So absolutely, pro-lifers and it is pro-lifers who are becoming foster parents and who are adopting and are generously and they're generously deciding to do this and sacrificing for these children. Absolutely. But even if I never became a foster parent, even if I never would be willing to become a foster parent or to adopt a child, it doesn't mean that my arguments against abortion are wrong. It's the whole, like, you can be a complete hypocrite and your argument can still be right. I can be preaching and lecturing against abortion and still going and having all these abortions in my spare time, but my argument's still correct, even though I'm living a hypocritical life. So yeah, the foster care thing I heard over and over again. The other thing I really challenge people to do, and I mentioned that earlier at Boston College, is at every school, I really wanted to challenge the notion right at the bat that you're not pro-choice. I saw this on Twitter again today with someone saying there's another option. It's a pro-choice option. It's not the either or. We were doing, and I mentioned last week in the podcast about doing some polling, qualitative polling on mushy middle women. And it's almost like being pro-choice is like the moral high ground, saying I don't like abortion, but I wouldn't have one. Like, almost like that's become the moral high ground in the debate. And that's so wrong, because you can't be pro-choice on a lot of moral issues, right? So you can't be pro-choice on, is anyone like, when we argue against abortion, we're making a moral claim. We're not making a preference claim. It's not like choosing vanilla or chocolate ice cream. I'm pro chocolate ice cream. You're pro vanilla. Who cares? And there's not really a way to say which one's better, because it's about individual preferences and taste buds. But when you're talking about abortion, there's a right and there's a wrong. Just like when you're talking about sex trafficking, or you're talking about slavery, or you're talking about child labor. There are rights and there are wrongs. And you can't really be pro-choice on that. If you're pro-choice on it, you're pro whatever that is. If you're pro-choice on slavery, well, I wouldn't own slaves, but I can't tell you not to own slavery. Okay, fine. Then you're pro-legal slavery. So that's something we really try to combat. I am all for calling myself anti-abortion. I've done op-eds on this. I've done interviews on this because often we use anti-abortion when we're on college campuses because, quite frankly, it's just faster and easier to describe what we are, because the left has done a really good job of muddying what the hell pro-life means. And so a lot of times it's just faster to say I'm anti-abortion. They get it right away. So I'm totally fine if we want to start using anti-abortion and pro-abortion. Let's do it. Good. Let's go for it. But what I find so fascinating is why students don't want to use don't want to use pro-abortion. Why is it that like at Boston College, it took me multiple minutes, multiple questions going around to get the young girl to admit she was pro-abortion? Why? My point was, look, if you're so damn proud of it, then own up to it. If you're proud of abortion, if you're proud to be standing here supporting abortion, wearing your Planned Parenthood pink scarf or Planned Parenthood pink sweater, then say the damn word that you're pro-abortion. But the reality is no one wants to say they're pro-abortion. Why? Because we instinctively know as human beings in our heart of hearts that there's something wrong with abortion. That makes us feel a little icky inside. That's why no one wants to be pro-abortion. But make them choose. Make them choose. Another thing I saw on campuses, a little advertisement for LaCroix, was over and over again rape and incest. I talked about this last episode about the Alabama abortion ban, about rape and how to respond to rape. We saw that over and over again. That's a common one. I took my fetal models, you can see them over here, to campus, and I actually demonstrated how a heart attack abortion happens. I have a needle, and I showed how the needle goes to the mother's abdomen, pierces the child, and inserts digoxin, a chemical, into the baby's heart, causes heart attack abortion. Baby's born, hopefully, dead. If not, the baby is born alive and left to die in the abortion facility. What was interesting, it wasn't graphic. I didn't show bloody images at all. But guess what? People kept turning away. Students actually would turn away so they didn't have to see what I was showing. So I thought that was pretty shocking that even the pro-choice students, the students who turned out wearing the Planned Parenthood t-shirt or whatever, they didn't want to actually see what abortion was. They didn't want to be told what abortion was, right? Why? Because once you know about abortion, once you know the reality of what abortion really does, it makes you rethink it. It makes you rethink your position on that, and maybe makes you rethink the way you're living your life and the decisions you're making, right? The other thing I've noticed too, I think this will be my last point on this, is that our Students for Life groups were unafraid in promoting the event. So previously I've had Students for Life groups who are like, I know your speech title is the highest feminist tell, but let's do something different. Let's change it, make your title nicer. And the reason that we keep it kind of abrupt, lies feminists tell, is because we want people to show up. We want people to be mad, be like, I'm a feminist. I don't tell lies. What's she saying? We want people to be like inquisitive, like what's going on? Like, why is she saying this? We don't want to be like, oh, come hear this person talk about why she thinks abortion's bad. No one really wants to hear it. So I think what we saw with this semester is like every Students for Life group was on board with keeping the title of the speech the main driver, the main promotional tool, and that drove people out. It drove more people out. And that's the challenge that so many Students for Life groups have on campuses, and quite frankly, so many Right to Life groups have, is you have events and no one freaking comes. You're talking to yourselves. We have to bring people out to hear our message. We have to get them out to our events, because guess what, folks? Every time we speak truth, every time we tell somebody what abortion really is, what it really does, how it really harms, how it kills, we win. We win. But we have to be unafraid. And yes, you have to be willing to cause a little controversy. Yes, speaking truth is going to hurt people's feelings. It's going to hurt people's feelings. But you have to get over it because you love people so much. I love people so much. I want to tell them the truth. I want to tell them how they're being lied to by the abortion industry. That's how we win. Hey guys, that's it for today's episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or YouTube to this podcast, and we'll chat next time.